Cashier shames grandma for using plastic bag. Then, here's her remark. Going to the grocery store is a daily reality for most of us. It was no different for Dorothy. Dorothy might have been older, but that didn't stop her from doing her own shopping and loading her own trolley. Despite the routine nature of the trip, it would be a very different experience that day. As usual, Dorothy walked around the store, going up and down the aisles picking out her groceries. Once she was satisfied she'd collected everything she wanted, she went to the checkout counter to pay. When the cashier started to speak to her, Dorothy was shocked at what she heard. Dorothy decided to buy in bulk, so she unloaded it all, knowing that she'd need a strong bag to deal with a load. Fortunately, she had some hefty bags with her. The cashier sighed when she saw how much stuff Dorothy was unloading. As she was scanning each item, it was clear that it would be the biggest load she'd deal with all day. The cashier asked Dorothy how many bags she thought she'd need. Dorothy had no idea, so instead she merely pulled a bag off the roll and started packing the bags herself. The cashier started helping her. She was clearly annoyed and berated Dorothy, saying plastic bags aren't good for the environment. Dorothy was shocked. She'd come to this store for years and had never been taken to task like this before.
Also, if you have not done so already, please subscribe to our channel and click that notification bell to get inspired by these real-life stories every day. Now, back to the story.
She stopped packing the bags and looked to the cashier. Still quite stunned, she simply responded by saying, "We didn't have this green thing back in my earlier days." Dorothy then started to pack her bags again. Thinking she had the high ground, the cashier continued berating her. "That's our problem today. Your generation didn't care enough to save our environment for future generations," she said. Dorothy responded, "Back then, we returned milk bottles, soda bottles, and beer bottles to the store. The store sent them back to the plant to be washed and sterilized and refilled so we could use the same bottles over and over, so they really were recycled. But we didn't have the green thing back in our day." Dorothy didn't stop there, however. She continued, "Grocery stores bagged our groceries in brown paper bags that we reused for numerous things. Most memorable besides household garbage bags was the use of paper brown bags as book covers for our school books. This was to ensure that public property, the books provided for our use by the school, was not defaced by our scribblings. Then we were able to personalize our books on the brown paper bags, but too bad we didn't do the green thing back then." Naturally, there was a queue behind Dorothy, all waiting to pay. It was clear the cashier was eager to serve them and many of them were getting impatient, but several of those in queue were clearly struck by Dorothy's words and were becoming interested in what she had to say. Dorothy didn't stop there. She continued talking as she packed her cart. "We walked upstairs because we didn't have an escalator in every store and office building. We walked to the grocery store and didn't climb into a 300 horsepower machine every time we had to go 2 blocks. But you're right, we didn't have the green thing in our day." Each statement hammering home the fact that in many respects the older generations lived much greener than modern ones. Dorothy was in full swing now and continued going. Most of the customers had fallen silent at her words. "Back then, we washed the baby's diapers because we didn't have the throwaway kind. We dried clothes on a line, not in an energy-gobbling machine burning up 220 volts. Wind and solar power really did dry our clothes back in our early days. Kids got hand-me-down clothes from their brothers or sisters, not always brand new clothing. But young lady, you're right, we didn't have the green thing back in our day." In modern society, TV has become a central part of the so-called nuclear family. It took merely a decade since they were available on the mass market for TVs to be almost every home. Back then, we had one TV or radio in the house, not a TV in every room, and the TV had a small screen the size of a handkerchief, not a screen the size of the state of Montana. She realized she was holding up the queue, but it was clear people were taking note of what she said. Many of them were smiling at the anecdotes she was sharing while the cashier was still lost for words. No one knew what she'd say next. She saw her chance to finally drive her point home. She moved her tirade into the realm of the kitchen and ways they prepared food. In the kitchen, we blended and stirred by hand because we didn't have electric machines to do everything for us. Back then, we didn't fire up an engine and burn gasoline just to cut the lawn. We used a push mower that ran on human power. We exercised by working, so we didn't need to go to a health club to run on treadmills that operate on electricity. But you're right, we didn't have the green thing back then." She placed her bag into the trolley. Dorothy talked about public and private transportation. Back then, people took the streetcar or bus and kids rode their bikes to school or walked, instead of turning their moms into a 24-hour taxi service in the family's $45,000 SUV or van, which cost what a whole house did before the green thing. And you know what? She's right.
If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up and consider sharing it with someone who may find it interesting too. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next one.